get started. So I will just introduce myself. I have a number of items that I'm going to be putting in the chat throughout the session as well. So just keep an eye for that. My name is Roxanne Wright. I am the manager of continuing education at St. Mike's at U of T. So that is the organization that's hosting and has organized the event tonight. I'm really happy to see so many people interested in this topic tonight and just
Eight
interested
participants.
in meeting and hearing from our um, hearing from our authors. So the way that I've set up the meeting tonight, we should be able to uh, folks should be able to put messages in the chat for everyone, or a message just to me. So if there's something that you want to ask me specifically, please feel free to do that. We have five amazing authors with us tonight. I am going to share a slide that has a little bit of information about each, and we will we will begin from there. And I'll hand it over to Michael.
You're handing it over to me now, or you will hand it over to me
I
when we're
am I
ready.
am officially handing it over to you now.
Okay. I don't think we can see your screen yet with
Not yet.
these. Okay.
Coming in one
Um,
second.
okay, no problem. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Salvatore, and I'm the Director of Continuing Education at St. Michael's, and really delighted to moderate this panel of children's book authors this evening. And we hope that you'll enjoy it and learn something about their books and their capacity, I think, to help young people and the adults who care about them look at some of the more challenging issues, difficult issues sometimes to talk to young people about and how they do that. So I'll look forward to posing some questions. Sorry, Roxanne, anything further from you, or would you like me just to begin?
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I just wanted to again draw attention to our amazing panelists today. So we have Hadley Dyer, Joyce Grant, Ina Figatina, Rabia Kokar, and Rochelle Strauss with us tonight. And I'm putting I know that when folks join, they may not have access to the chat before they joined. So I'm going to just be pasting that information into the chat a couple times as people are being admitted. So if you see that come through again, it's not a glitch in the matrix, it's on purpose. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can see everyone's faces. Um, and I will I again hand it over to Michael now.
Great. Thanks, Roxanne. Again, welcome everyone. I'm really excited about the panel tonight because I love children's books. I have them all over my office and at home in every room. And I've always appreciated them, I think, because of the characters, the stories, sometimes the memories that they evoke from my own childhood. And I love the way that the children's books leave room for the reader, leave room for our imaginations, for reflection. And recently, in the last year, I learned something new about children's books. I attended a talk by one of our authors this evening, a lecture at the University of Toronto, about how children's books can do all of those wonderful things: tell stories, entertain us, bring us joy, make us think, but also introduce some challenging topics and teach us a little bit about those, both to the caring adults in their lives and to the children about social issues, political issues. And I found it really fascinating to see how a book could do all of those things. And that's what we're hoping to explore this evening. I love children's books so much that I'm taking a course right now from the University of Toronto on writing picture books for children, and I'm playing hooky tonight because I love this panel even more. So I'm missing the first part of my last class so that to be here with you, and I'm really glad to do that. So for the first half hour or so, I have a series of questions that I'll pose, and we'll hear from the authors, and they'll probably make reference to some of their works more specifically in answering the questions. And then we'll open it up to you and hear what questions and comments you have for the panel. So with that, the first question that I have is to ask our panel um, about your motivation or your inspiration to write a book for children that explores a social or a political or an environmental issue. Um, why those topics, and also how did you acquire the knowledge, the expertise to be able to write so knowledgeably about it? So I'll open with that one, and any one of our panels can jump on that one. And Roxanne, I think you may need to unmute the authors. I think they're all muted as well. Or I don't know if they can unmute themselves. Or maybe just if whoever would like to take that one, if you want to raise your hand, we'll unmute you. There we go, Rochelle. Thank you.
I unmuted first. Is that the penalty?
That's great. That's exactly.
Um, it's a really good question, Michael, and I think you'll find that all of us have come from this from a very different background. So for me, the seeds were first planted in undergrad. I did a children's lit course. I actually have an undergrad degree in psychology and child development, and I struggled through that. But I took a children's lit course, and in my last year, while I was reading Charlotte's Web, everybody else was reading organic chem, and I was very happy with that. And I loved the course, and it really kind of planted the seeds. Fast forward a few years, I did my master's degree in environmental studies in environmental education. And it was a time when we were really starting to discuss the disconnection of children with the natural world. It was before nature deficit disorder was coined, but it was the initial seedings of nature deficit disorder. Um, Having a background that I spent a fair bit of time outside, but I also spent a fair bit of time surrounded by books by Jacques Cousteau and
Hmm.
reading a lot about nature and the environment. And I kind of had this thought that what if we could help build connections between young people and nature through books? So as they're getting disconnected more and more physically, emotionally, spiritually from nature, and they're surrounded by concrete jungles, could nonfiction books or fiction books offer that sense of connection? I was doing some research at the time with a professor, and she was studying the attitudes and perceptions and beliefs of young children about animals. And when we interviewed kids in kindergarten and grade one, when they talked about meeting a frog, a raccoon, or a bat, the stories were all about having tea together and playing together. By the time we interviewed kids in grade five and grade six, all the stereotypes of the animals came through, all the negative feelings, all of that stuff. So there's a moment for me that if we can capture them between kindergarten and grade six and offer them that sense of connection, that hopefully that sense of connection will transpire throughout their adulthood. And that's where I started thinking about writing books more seriously. I had thought fiction at first, but I had the opportunity to pitch Kids Can Press my first book, Tree of Life, based on some work that I had done at the Royal Ontario Museum, and it was a hit, and we moved from there. In terms of research, I like to spend a lot of time. I mean, my passion is nature and the environment. My passion is environmental issues. So I spend a lot of time in those stories,
Hmm.
looking for the story or the moment that's going to capture, that needs to be told or that's going to capture children's imagination. So, for example, I knew UNESCO was planning an Ocean Decade activity. I knew some of the principles around ocean literacy and building ocean literacy. And I felt it was the right time to write a book like The Global Ocean. In terms of research, I do most of my own research, but I rely very heavily on subject matter experts
Hmm.
for interviews, to provide information, to vet the books. And subject matter experts are the scientists, the researchers, but also the educators. I want to hear how the book is going to support them in their work and in their curriculum requirements. So all my books are a kind of collaborative effort with my
Hmm.
subject matter experts, my research, et cetera, to make sure that the science is right, to make sure that the issues that are important are discussed, and to make sure it's done in an accessible way and supports teachers to meet their curriculum requirements.
Thanks, Rochelle. I love both the references, especially to Charlotte's Web, which I read with a young reader through the Toronto Public Library this year, and Jacques Cousteau as well. So thanks for that really comprehensive answer. Any one of the other authors want to tackle that question before I move on? Ina, please.
Thanks, Michael. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ina Figatina, and I'm the author of bilingual children's book, Trilingual Me Matrilingue. And to answer your question, Michael, so I am a core French teacher for the York Region District School Board. And fun fact, Michael actually signed my OCT teaching certificate about a decade ago when I graduated. So as a core French teacher, I struggle to find resources for my students on the topic of second language acquisition. And when I started doing my Master of Education at the University of British Columbia, I specialized in modern languages education, and I had the opportunity to complete a capstone thesis project where I could create a resource. I could get more creative. And instead of publishing a dissertation paper, I was given the option to publish something else, and I decided to publish children's book, in particular a bilingual children's book. And I was very fortunate to have a classmate in my cohort who recently published a children's book, so she was able to guide me through the publishing process. As I said, as a core French teacher, I struggle to find a resource that is written for children on the topic of celebrating the linguistic diversity in the classroom, and topics such as the process of immigrating to another country and learning a new language. So my book is my personal journey of becoming trilingual and overcoming the challenges on that journey. And now that the book is published, I feel very proud, and it's also very rewarding to hear from other language teachers who are using my book in their classrooms, and hearing the feedback from them, because they're students who are either immigrants themselves or come from immigrant families. They can see themselves in the book, and it makes me very proud that I published the book and it is out for
Absolutely.
others to use in their classrooms.
And when we all know the value of seeing our language, home languages, seeing them used and seeing them in a classroom space. So thank you very much. Joyce, do you want to jump on that one as well before we move to our second and more difficult question? I think you're on mute, Joyce.
I wasn't, and then I was, and then I
Okay.
wasn't. Sorry about that. My name is Joyce Grant, and I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, and also to U of T for putting this on. I think it's a fabulous idea to look at children's books in this way. I started out, like Rochelle, I started out in fiction and picture books, and then sort of, because I have a journalism background, I was talking to a lot of young people about journalism and what's going on in the news. We launched a website called teachingkidsnews.com in 2010, and lots of educators and students were using that, and I was going out into the classrooms and talking to thousands of students every year about the news and all of that kind of thing. And honestly, this kind of came organically from the students I was talking to. They started saying, how can we spot fake news? How do we know if something's real online, and how do we know? And that sort of sparked my book, which is Can You Believe It? How to Spot Fake News and Find the Facts. There it is. And it really was helpful to me personally in a time when some, politics was becoming really divisive. A lot of ignorance seemed to be bliss to people. People were kind of choosing not to look at facts and to believe whatever they wanted to believe online. And it was a time when I could either sort of go within myself, and the pandemic, of course, and go within myself and say, I just want to turn off the news and not hear all this. Or I could sort of do something that felt right to my spirit, which was writing. And fortunately, this opportunity came along, and I was able to kind of share what I had learned from the students I'd been talking to for 5 years, and really understand what they they were looking for and what they didn't know about things. And I could sort of fill in the gaps. So I continue to go into a lot of classrooms and talk to young people. And I'm continuing to do more work around critical thinking. And I have a book called Burst Your About how we're all in algorithms and how to get out of your algorithm and sort of see what you're missing. So that'll be coming out next year. So I'm continuing that critical thinking work.
Terrific. And I was going to mention that the critical literacies that we teach young people are so important in everything that they do. And I mean, there was a time when if you read it in the newspaper or on TV, it was true because of where it was. And so I think now more than ever, our eyes have been open and we see the value in looking a little bit more deeply and thinking and triangulating. I'll move on to another question. For many of us, I think, and me in particular, children's books are and have been sources of joy, entertainment. And we sometimes read them to young people before bed to help them have pleasant dreams and to relax. How do you balance, I guess, in your books, that notion or that expectation that readers may have that a book should be something that brings joy or have interesting characters with the exploration of a social or a political issue? And is it possible? I know it is because you've done it in your books, but is it possible to do both, or does one overshadow the other in the production of or the creation of a book that explores a social issue, but at the same time is a book for children? Rabia, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rabia Kokar. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to be speaking to this through my role as a teacher as well as a PhD student who is really passionate and studies children's books, specifically picture books for social justice education. And it's like an honor to be here with all of you, so many amazing authors and attendees. I think your question is a good one, Michael, because I feel like oftentimes we like to put things in binaries. I think that's how our mind works. We kind of want to put like serious books and like joy books kind of like in a separate way. But I feel like it's possible to have a book that's focused on joy, but also a social issue all wrapped up into one thing. I think it's possible. And I think that children are very like critical and they're very aware. And I think that they can deal with like the hard stuff. And I think that so many books can have like the really hard elements or like, things about racism or climate justice, whatever it is, but it can also be a form of joy. And I think we maybe need to like reframe how we think about some of these things, because I really feel like children are capable, competent, critical, and they're really aware of like what's happening in the world. They might just not have the language or they might not necessarily I guess they're still like learning how to navigate those things, how to understand what's happening to them. And I think a book is like the perfect tool to really help them, guide them through that, right? By providing language, by providing what's happening, why is it happening? And I think a book can really center joy as well as the social issue. I think one of the ways we can really do this well is by showing like an action. So even if it's like a really hard topic that we're learning about, whether it's like racism, I think it's really important that like the book shows like how are people like fighting against it, or like what is the action, whether it's a small action or a big action that they're taking to kind of make things a little bit better. So I feel like the aspect of hope, critical hope, is like almost necessary for books to be taken well, because we want to read about this thing that might be really hard, but we also want to inspire young people to know that even though this thing is really hard and you might be experiencing it, or your friends in your local community might be experiencing it, there's always something that we can do to kind of create a change or to take an action that will make things a little bit better. And I think that a book can maybe help us show like what are the people in the story doing. If they're not doing something in the story, what is something that you would like the character to do? So I think the way that we frame the books and how we think about the books beyond those binaries, I think we need to maybe see those books in that like the messy middle, right? And I think we just need to see it as this like packaged bundle that we kind of can share with young people.
Yeah. Thank you. And that, really leads into, I think, one of the key questions that I have and that maybe others have is, um, many of us here are caring adults in the lives of young people, whether we're parents or teachers or other family members or writers. How do we do that? So how have you seen your works used um, by adults to perhaps broach a topic that may be a challenging one from a point of education or from a point of I guess providing advice or exploring? How have you seen them used? So how would we use one of your books with a young person, whether it's exploring threats to the environment or spotting fake news or the importance of public spaces or plurilingualism? How have you seen them used, and what advice do you have for us if we wanted to pick up a book and try to do something like that with a young person? Anybody can jump in on this one.
I'll jump in.
Thanks, Hadley. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, and I'll
Well,
go to you, Ina.
I'll speak from two perspectives because I'm a writer of fiction and nonfiction, but I'm also an editor who's worked at multiple publishing houses. Right now, I'm at Anik Press, and I know there are a number of writers and editors here among us. So, hello, colleagues. I should actually preface what I'm going to say by pointing out that a lot of these projects are actually in nonfiction in particular are very publisher driven. Many publishing houses, even a majority of their nonfiction is the ideas are generated in-house. And a lot of that comes from a process of looking what exists out in the world, where there are holes in the market, what are teachers asking for, what are booksellers asking for, what are we seeing is missing in our own communities. And of course, publishers have the advantage of being able to get this enormous infrastructure behind them and having the capacity to do research into this sort of thing and getting ongoing feedback into it. So a lot of times, it starts with a publisher working with a writer, commissioning a writer. I've often been commissioned for my books and saying, okay, what do we need and how do we serve these readers best? How will this book be used? So before the book's even published, there's been a serious consideration of how will that book be used? Is this a book that's just going to be on the shelf in the library so a kid, doing a book report or whatever can find it? Is this a book that's going to link to the curriculum so a teacher can use it? Is this a book that a parent can use to comfort a kid or introduce a subject that they is? So a lot of it, everything from the title of the book to the way it's structured, its length, its reading, all of that is about, matching that subject to that reader and putting it into a form where it's useful and also where it might distinguish it from other similar books that are out there. So, before one of the big questions I've had to answer, both as a writer and as an editor, but I'll point to my own books, like my book on public spaces, or this book with Anik Press, where I now work, More Than Money, which is about economic inequality. The reason those books were written was specifically because we thought no one had written about those subjects for young people before. Most young people have no idea that things like public spaces and economic inequality are relevant to their day-to-day lives. And so we sort of designed the book in a way to sort of make the case for why kids should care about this subject, which of course is going to be an entirely different thing than, say, something like, maybe one of Joyce's books, for example, where, she might be reaching out to kids who are already engaged in this issue in some way, and the connection is obvious, and she wants to kind of hook them in for a deeper dive.
I'm really curious to know about some of the other topics that are coming from classrooms or from the publisher, but I'm going to save that question for the end about what's on the horizon. I saw Joyce's hand and Rochelle as well. Joyce, maybe go over to you and then Rochelle.
Yeah, I just want to expand on what Hadley's saying. A lot of how my book is structured came from a really fabulous editor, Kathleen Keenan at Kids Can Press. And she deliberately structured it so that you can hand my book to a kid and it will kind of walk the child through the various steps and sort of prepare them, as Hadley said, explain why this book is about, you know, why you need to know about fake news and journalism is important for democracy and all that kind of stuff. And then kind of get into like what it is and what it isn't. And then teach them about how journalism's made so that if you can understand how real journalism's done, you'll be able to spot fake news. Then we sort of ease them into, okay, here's what you might be looking for. And then here's what to do about it if you want. Not pressuring them to do anything, but just sort of suggesting that these are the things you can do if you feel motivated. And so it takes them on a little journey. And I've seen it used two ways. One, with adults as well. A lot of people buy the books, you know, for the adult in their life that they wish could spot fake news a little bit easier. So that's been a revelation. But as well, if a kid is interested in journalism, if they're interested in fake news, you know, parents can sort of hand the book over and the child can sort of make their way through it. But also, it's one of those pick-upable books where you can just open to the chapter on journalism. And I've seen lots of educators do that. They skip from one chapter to the next, and then they do a lesson around that particular chapter, and then they skip to another in the way that it's structured for their teaching. So it kind of supports their teaching in that way. So it's been great to see people using the book.
Thank you, Joyce. And you know, interesting to see that it's, you know, kind of self-serve for the young person, but also, you know, accompanied by an adult. Rochelle, did you want to jump in on that one as well?
Yeah, sorry, sure. Agree wholeheartedly with everything Hadley and Joyce have said. And I want to also kind of flip this a little bit and talk about the parents in the room, and the educators in the room. Because one of the things I always say is, first off, nonfiction books aren't just for kids. They are for the adults. In fact, they're often the first point of reference for a nonfiction author when they're researching their own book, right? So I don't think adults should be afraid of sourcing nonfiction books for their own learning, whether you're a teacher or a parent or guardian. If your kids are interested, that's one way for you to build your own expertise. And I recently just came back from the National Council of Teachers of English conference, where we were working with English teachers, a fellow author, Lindsay Carmichael, and I, helping teachers understand and not be afraid of what we call interest-driven learning. Is if your students are interested in a topic and you don't know about it, grab a nonfiction book. There are authors there doing that. And I think what's nice and where it becomes important and how it can be used is nonfiction books are actually built on the foundation of inquiry-based learning. We are inquiring, and then we're sharing that inquiry process. And when adults and children read these books together, and yes, adults might want to pre-read them first and build a little bit more of their knowledge, but when they read them together, it offers up opportunities to open up conversations, dialogues, et cetera, about difficult subjects, as we're talking about. But it allows you to collectively build new perspectives, have new ways of looking at things, consider different opportunities, et cetera. And it creates these incredible shared learning experiences and builds this common shared language and this common shared understanding of the world. So I think it's really, they're valuable tools, whether you know about the topic or not. They're valuable tools to bring into the conversation. And even to go back to what you said earlier, it's nice to read books that are poetic and lull you to sleep, but there's nothing wrong with reading nonfiction at bedtime either. It's nothing wrong. Some of my best conversations with my own kid were deep and profound conversations about the world based off a nonfiction book that I read piece by piece at night before bed.
Well, I'm going to add to my nightstand some good nonfiction children's books as well. A few of you have used, you know, a few terms that are coming forth, and that I think about when I think about some of these topics: difficult and pressure or not pressuring. And so my question is about, how do we handle representing difficult topics like the ones that you've mentioned and many others in a way that doesn't overwhelm students, so that are perhaps empowering or help them to learn without that feeling of dread or doom or I guess overwhelming pressure. How do we accomplish that? We'll go over to Ina and then off into Rabia next, and then take it from there. Ina, please.
That's a great question, Michael. And I'm finding that when it comes to the feedback that I've received from the caring adults who've been reading my book to the young people in their lives. From their perspective, so not in a classroom setting and not as a teacher reading the story. In the book, I talk about the challenges that I had to overcome during my second and third language acquisition journey, which included having a speech impairment and going to see a speech language pathologist, and then my journey of immigrating to Canada and learning both English and French at the same time. So as someone who perhaps did not have the same experiences as the main character in the story, instead of focusing on those specific challenges that I talk about in the book, the focus becomes the inspirational message of the story, which is perseverance. When facing adversity or being in a challenging situation, how do you overcome those challenges and those feelings of this is hard, how am I going to do this? These overwhelming emotions that you feel. And everyone has faced some sort of challenge, not necessarily a language learning challenge, but a lot of people can share and have this discussion with the student or the child about a situation where they had to face a challenge and how they persevered and overcame it. So focusing on the inspirational message, the moral of the story, is how I have heard from the feedback that I've gotten. This is the focus, as opposed to helping the child feel hopeful and empowering them by reading the children's book to them.
Yeah, and seeing a path forward and drawing on their their own reserves. Yeah, thank you. Rabia, please.
Thank you so much, Ina, for saying that. I think what your comment really reminds me of is like seeing like what are those like entry points, those common entry points that all books sort of share, whether it's like friendship or like family or community or language. So kind of finding some of those big themes or entry points and really framing it in that way so that like all students sort of have like some sort of an entryway in. It might be like a mirror experience for some, it might be a window, but I feel like books can be both at the same time. You know, there's things that we share, and in any book, there's things that we can connect to and things that we learn. So I think it's really important how we like frame the story and how we help our students through like intentional questioning or pausing, or how we kind of like frame it and the questions that we might ask, or like the places that we might want to pause in the book. I think all of those are some of those intentional ways that we can kind of use these books to even talk about like hard topics with our young people. I think it's important that some of the questions that we help our students help them think about the experience of the character in the book, but then also help them connect to that experience in some capacity, in some way. I think that really helps us sort of like localize and almost like humanize the issue. And I feel like once we can sort of like humanize it and bring it down to our own level or like some form of our own lived reality, I think that we can really see that in a different way. And I think that that can be really empowering, and that can also take away some of like the hardness or the scariness from something. And I think one other thing that I sort of do as an educator is to really think about intentionally, like sometimes like reading the book beforehand, seeing like, you know, what's happening in the book, where do I want to pause, but then also kind of like following the children's lead or the young people's lead. So like reading, but then seeing like what are some of the things that they're interested in, how can I respond to that, where do I want to leave room for a question and a pause. And so I think it's like a very intentional experience, and I think it's like we're not reading to them, but like we're reading with them. So it's kind of like this relational experience. And I think the relational experience can sort of take away some of that like scariness and hardness and help us even think about this topic that might be a little bit hard for us, right?
yeah, I think as you're talking, you really see that role of the adult as the guide, and being prepared and leaving room for the children's reactions. Yeah, Rochelle, and then Joyce, your views.
I'll sum it up quickly because I know we've got a lot of time, but I deal with a lot of work around climate and climate anxiety, and the stuff I'm talking
Mm.
about can raise these issues of fear. And I think one thing that I've learned over the last few years is when we share stories of hope, when we share opportunities, young people see opportunity for engagement, they see opportunities to learn more, they build their interest. So the first is to show stories of action and opportunities where they can get involved. When they see opportunities where they can get involved, they start to develop their own sense of agency. And at the crux
Mm.
of everything is that need for agency. And young children, when dealing with difficult topics, never feel that they have agency or autonomy to do anything. So when we create opportunities and show them opportunities, we're building in them a sense of agency. When we have agency and opportunity, or when we have agency and opportunity built together, we have hope. And when
Mm.
we have hope, when we create stories that can share hope, we can tackle the most difficult topics and not leave children paralyzed in a corner because we've
Mm.
built opportunity and agency and hope.
Thank you. I feel more confident in having difficult conversations. I might need to get some coaching from you. Thank you. Thanks for that. Joyce, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that on Teaching Kids News, we did news stories, and we certainly did a lot of challenging news stories. And so we faced this just about every day. How do we share this news with young people? And we kind of developed this 5 or 6 pronged approach, which is that we would first of all back into a story. So we would sort of go in it fairly softly. We wouldn't just sort of bang the big news first. And then second of all, find the helpers, as was so famously said by Mr. Rogers, find the helpers and also explain to the child why they themselves are safe. Because a lot of times kids don't have the experience with things. We look at a situation and we can say, well, that's happened a bunch of times in my lifetime and we've always survived and I know we will. Kids don't have that context. So sometimes you have to explain to them why they will be safe, why governments are changing the regulations for this, or you're in a particular region where you won't be affected, or whatever it is that helps them to be safe. And then, as the other speakers have said, be available to answer their questions and listen to what they have to say, because what you want to tell them might not be what their concern is. Like, we've all had that question about where do babies come from, and you're telling them and you're sort of going in one direction and they mean, no, I mean the neighbor's baby. Where did it come from today? It was at the park. So listening to where they're at and sort of meeting them there.
Yeah, all very helpful, and giving voice to the young people and agency. I really appreciate that. I'm going to Roxanne, I think we're going to open it up. We'd love to hear what some of our participants have to say. If they have questions that they'd like to pose to our panel, and you're welcome to pose a question directly to one of the authors or a general one, and we'll open it up for you right now. So, Roxanne, I'll turn it over to you to kind of facilitate this.
All right, for sure. So I just put something in the chat that you can use the raise hand function. You should see it at the bottom of your controls, and I will hopefully be able to see when you raise your hand and
Right.
be able to ask you to unmute if you haven't got that functionality yourself.
Great.
To be good teachers and wait a minute for
Yeah, it's good teacher
people to
wait
be
time.
raised.
If not,
Yeah.
I still have other questions that I'm curious about, and lots more that have come to the fore. So, anything that jumps out to anyone that you want to pursue further, or a question that you had coming into the panel that you really wanted to hear about? I know that we have a whole variety of different people from who are authors or publishers themselves. We have teacher educators here and teachers, so feel free to jump in.
I see Jillian with a raised hand.
Okay,
Over
can
to
you
you,
hear me
Julia.
okay?
We can.
Okay. I wondered in all the difficult subjects if the authors or Hadley from the publisher side have encountered a difficult topic that they haven't yet figured out how to talk about. Or whether from publisher side, like we'd love to do this book, but we have no idea, or an author saying, and I'm not saying they're impossible to talk about. I'm just saying you haven't yet found the way to talk about it.
I can
Jump in, Joyce. Yeah, please,
I can give
Joyce.
you my perspective on teaching kids news, my kids news website. You know, if something was just massively bad and scary, you know, because when a child is reading our website, we needed to keep it a safe space. And if something was so bad that I couldn't back in, or I couldn't find a way in, or I couldn't explain why this is happening, some egregious racism, or I mean, racism is always egregious, but some event that I just couldn't find the space, we would simply not cover it, because if you're not there with the child to listen to their concerns, answer their questions, and help them feel safe, then it kind of made our website not a safe space for kids. So there were some things when you just can't find a way in, you know, you just can't explain it, even as an adult or a child. So there were some topics for teaching kids news that we did avoid, you know.
Thank you, Joyce. Hadley.
I would say that in my experience at publishing companies, it hasn't so much been that there's been a specific topic that was too dark, let's say, or too complicated, but there are any number of topics, complicated or not, where you really do struggle with the right way to frame it, with what's the hook, you know, who's the audience, what's the right way. You can get overwhelmed. Nonfiction projects in particular, but not just nonfiction, I was just talking about this with a fellow editor today. You know, you have these projects that you drag around for ages, and you know, it's like you keep it's like Anne Lamott said, it's like a dog with a chew toy. You pick it up and you shake it and you throw it down and you walk away and you come back and you pick it up and you shake it. And there's just something that's not quite right. You know, it's not specific enough. It's been sort of done before, and you want an original way in, or you want to do it for a younger reading level, but you don't. So it certainly is extremely challenging sometimes to do it. But I can't remember a time in recent years where a publisher I've worked with on either side of the desk has said, I don't know, that seems a little bit too dicey for us. And I will say, you know, that's a credit to Canadian publishers who have, you know, throughout their histories tackled, like right from the get-go, many of these companies have been tackling these topics, and not always the way that they should, or often enough, or, you know, using, you know, not staffing themselves or using the appropriate voices and so on. And there have been a lot of lessons learned. But it is, you know, and Jillian knows this as well as anyone, because of course she's reviewed about 800,000 books in her time.
Prolific. Thank you, Hadley. Mary Phillips asking a question in the chat about how quickly nonfiction books date themselves. Do they? And is it fast?
I can jump in and share a funny little tidbit. Most of my stuff is science. So the scientific principles usually don't change. Some of the stats and data change, but I have a book that hit 20 years this August. So Tree of Life has been around for 20 years. It's still selling. It hasn't dated. One Well, which was my next book, is going to be 20 years in 2007, and it's still in curriculum across the US. So this stuff does get dated, but I think if the story is the right story, I think readers know that some of the stats, they might go in and, you know, this year it might have been 12,000 and next year it might be 15,000. But if they go in, the scientific principles don't change. One thing that I like to do, though, to make sure they stay current is when I do school presentations, I'll update any of the content that needs to be updated when I'm presenting. if I'm doing blogs or social media or any other kind of teachers' guides or resources, if there are things that need to be updated, they will get updated. And both my books have had updated editions, so there is opportunity to bring the new content into the books as well.
You anticipated my follow-up question, and that was whether there are different editions of nonfiction books for children. Yeah. And I think the advantage of technology is there too, where you can update on, by the minute if you need to, statistics or new advances. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions from our participants? I think there's another one here. Loretta is asking, since there's so many different curricula in schools, how do you decide to meet the needs of teachers and students? How do you decide which needs or which curriculum to focus on? I know that, yeah, Joyce, please.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about talking to the students. It's all about going out there and talking to the students and finding out what they're interested in, where are they at? And in children's literature, every children's author and certainly the publishing houses, they are experts in the reader, like nobody's business. I mean, they know exactly who this child is who's going to be picking up this book, who it's likely to be, whether or not they'll have a parent with them, whether or not they'll be reading it alone. And they think of all of those things. And I think it's so important to know the reader, especially in children's. That's what makes children's literature sometimes a real challenge, because you have to know the reader. You have to know who you're talking to, and you have to keep knowing the reader. It's not just enough to sort of remember, what you were like as a kid, or what your kid was like. Like, you have to know who you're talking to. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Rochelle.
I love this question. Thanks, Loretta. With the curriculum, it's always interesting. So as an environmental educator, my goal is to get environmental education in every subject, in every classroom, at every school. That has been a goal for 30 years. We're not there yet. We're getting closer. So when I write the books, obviously I start with the science curriculum beside my desk. And I usually use the Ontario curriculum, the BC curriculum, and the Alberta curriculum, and periodically one of the curriculums in the East Coast, and the next generation science standards in the US. So I write the book with the curriculum in mind so that I can support teachers in meeting curriculum requirements. And usually when I do research or book pitches, I let them know, here are the curriculum expectations that this book supports. And then I throw away the science curriculum and I look at every other curriculum. How can teachers bring this into math? What's the opportunity to bring this into English classes, because they're nonfiction science books? How can I get them into music class? How can I get them into social studies, geography, etc.? So I find ways and opportunities to bring the book and make the book support multiple curriculum, multiple subjects, multiple grades. And then I will write teachers' guides that do the same thing. So helping teachers see where the opportunity is to bring the global ocean into an English class and why they should.
Perfect. Thank you. One last question, and then we're going to give Roxanne a chance to talk a little bit to our participants about, if you like this, we have more coming. One of my questions is, what's on the horizon? What are other topics that you're exploring? And if you can share that, and understanding that they may still be in development. And one of the things that does keep me up at night and makes me wonder during the day is about artificial intelligence and, the rise of the machines and, the possibility that, the things that I think I can do well and that I'm sometimes valued for will not will be taken away from me because, I'm more easily and with less complaining. Are there topics that you're exploring that are emerging, or other ones that we can look for soon? Joyce, please.
Yeah, as I said, the AI. Oh, geez, Michael, talk about a difficult topic. Yeah, I'm going down this path of critical thinking, so I'm just fascinated by all of it. And you do have to sort of keep your book current, and the way to do that is, for me, has been to kind of zero in on what is it all really about. And it's about critical thinking. If you can arm young people with the tools to help them just sort of make that skeptical face and sort of like, what is going on here? Or is this too good to be true? Or, kind of, and show them a little bit behind the curtain and show them some things to look for. So I'm going down that path. So I'm looking at a few books on the horizon. As I say, we're going to be unpacking algorithms and looking at, why do I not get this in my feed? And why is my feed all of this? Well, that's deliberate. And here's why, and sort of unpacking that. And that will include AI and that kind of thing. And then I have another one coming up on how to find good sources. So sort of the same kind of critical thinking. And then I have a wonderful book that I'm excited about libraries, and how libraries and librarians around the world have made a difference in people's lives. And I'm excited about this, because this feels like a way that I can sort of help without, sort of getting down and dirty and too involved in the stuff that happens online and all the comments and also sort of shoring up kids to think critically.
Terrific. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And, I should say that, at St. Michael's, our Kelly Library is one of our greatest resources, and our continuing education division relies on it heavily for space, and the print studio, and the folks that work there. The library staff is wonderful. And so I look forward to that, Joyce. Anybody else with a topic that you're exploring, or one that you think, should be explored, that somebody should take up as an emerging challenge, for the next generation? Before I turn things over to Roxanne. Hadley, please.
Well, I just thought I'd mention that, ANIC recently hired an Indigenous editor, specifically to explore, all kinds of different types of books from an Indigenous perspective. And that's been great for me as well, because as an editor, those are topics. There are a lot of, so many topics I could explore, but I'm not necessarily the right editor for that. Or I am, but I need support. Or, I might be the right editor, but who's the right writer? And so to have that in-house talent, to grow our talent pool within the publishing house to explore these stories. And, some of them might be nonfiction stories, and we'll be collaborating on those. And some of them might be, as Rabia says, joyful stories that, yes, look at things through an Indigenous lens. And some of those issues may be tougher, and some of them might not be. But I think publishers are, doing more and more of that. So I'll give you another example. I wrote a book a number of years ago about urban farming, which ANIC published. And, a lot of that book, it's very, you can apply that topic to any number of communities, but it's of particular importance to a lot of, communities experiencing a variety of disadvantages. And if that book gets reissued, I don't think I'll be the author of it. I think, ANIC would be wise to choose somebody else to look at it from that perspective.
No, thank you for that, Hadley. Rochelle, last word to you, and then Roxanne, over to you.
First of all, I'm going to laugh, Joyce, when you talk about algorithms, and I, have a moment of going, I wonder why my feeds are all filled with ocean animals. I've got a couple of new projects I'm working on. I have a junior version of One Well coming out in 2026, which has been a really big stretch for me, because I'm writing for a much younger audience and having fun using adjectives and playful language that I don't often get to use. So that was fun. And a big shift with a sequel to One Well finally coming out. And the approach that I'm taking is a little bit different than I've taken before, because the emphasis, as we were talking about earlier, is on hope. So how do you talk about a water crisis and put the emphasis on hope? So that's been a lot of fun for me. And I'm hoping to, speaking about hope, to stretch a little bit. I've been doing a lot of environmental focused stuff, and I'm actually kind of getting excited about diving into STEM a little bit more. With a stronger STEM focus, also based in the ocean, I hope. So we'll see. And a few other projects on the go that I'm excited about, that are just still playing with the nonfiction, still playing with the education side of introducing young readers to animals and species and spaces, but finding new voices and new ways to do that.
Thank you, Rochelle. Lots of exciting things on the horizon. I really want to thank all of our panel members for being here tonight and sharing your wonderful works with us and your thoughts, and everybody else as well. And Roxanne, I'm so interested in this topic and exploring it further. Is there a way that I can do that?
There might be. I'm going to show a little bit of information now. So as you all know, St. Michael's College Continuing Education has been the host for our event tonight, and that is the department that Michael and I invited these folks from. So continuing it at St. Mike's, we are in a renewal process for this division. We have programs that build on our academic and intellectual traditions. Those include professional learning programs and general interest programs, including children's literature and social justice. And I just wanted to share, we have an upcoming course. It's going to be a workshop that's a half day in March in the new year. And we have a special price promotion where if folks sign up before Sunday night at midnight, they can get the course for 10% off. So all of today's panelists, as well as an author named Nassim Rab, are going to be joining. And the way the session is going to work is that the first part of the session, the first few hours, are going to be, hearing in depth information from the authors and presenters. And then a woman named Alicia Muscat, who is a social purpose leader, is going to use some specific tools, so the social change map and a Canvas kit for nonprofits that are sort of practical tools for refining and sort of building and deepening your own ideas. So it will be a workshop that's really focused on, hearing and participating in inspiring discussion, and then just turning around and saying, we know all the bad stuff. We know, like hope has been such a theme tonight. So where are we going to find that? Where is it going to come from? And how am I going to invest in sort of spreading that in my own community and context? And what are the actionable things that I can do? And just a little bit more information about that. So as I mentioned as well, oh, sorry, Michael, did you have a question or want to add something?
No, there's just a question in the chat, and I think I know the answer. This workshop is in person. I think it's not a virtual one. Yes, okay, it's in person. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's in person for the morning. And the so we also have a number of other general interest programs, including, like Michael mentioned, the library. We have a number of printmaking and book arts courses. My co-host, Lucy the cat, is really insistent on showing up right now. I'll just try to ignore her. We have Irish studies and a number of poetry and sort of other, sort of creative exploration courses. So if those are of interest, you can also write to me. I put my email in the chat. And if anyone has any questions or wants to follow up with me, they can do it that way. What we're also going to do probably tomorrow, because we're probably going to log off tonight and take a break. But tomorrow we will send the recording for tonight, as well as the slides that I showed and information that you can use to follow up with everyone who's registered. So everyone who's here tonight, and anyone, if you know someone who's registered and wasn't able to join, you can let them know that we're sending all this information out by email very soon. And I just want to join Michael in thanking everybody so much for making time on your Thursday night to join us, and also for our panelists for sharing their insight and wisdom tonight. And we are right at 8 o'clock. So I will let everyone carry on with their nights, and just thank you again for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.